that we all are brothers.
Remember that we all are brothers.
All people.
All people.
And beasts and trees.
And beasts and trees.
And stone and wind.
And stone and wind.
We all descend from the one great being.
We all descend from the one great being.
That was always there.
That was always there.
Before people lived and named it.
Before people lived and named it.
Before the first seeds sprouted.
Before the first seeds sprouted.
I'm looking at your hole-in-one Bel Air Country Club flag in the background, and I'm so jealous.
Right? That was on 10.
I know. I remember Mick posted the picture. Incredible. Blind hole-in-one. I mean, that's
blind hole-in-one in the rain, 240 over a canyon.
The Barranca. Yeah.
Yeah, Barranca.
Staring down the swinging bridge.
Swearing.
And, yeah. It's I was my closest I've ever been was from the back tees with a 5-wood on 10, 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
Or is it no 4? Is it 13? Yeah, 13. The par 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the closest I've ever been.
What's funny is that when we were walking up the bridge, we were laughing about how ridiculous of a hole it was, and we were laughing about it was me, Mick, and this guy Michael Hooks. You know him?
Yeah.
And we were laughing about how ridiculous would it be if somebody got a hole-in-one, and then when I hit the shot, Mick looked at me and he's like, "Dude, that's the best golf shot I think I've ever seen ever hit." Like you know how he gets intense like that?
Yeah.
And he goes, "Dude, that was like the best shot I think I've ever seen anyone ever hit." And then, the caddy's up at the green and you can't see him because it's a blind green. Yeah. And so we're cruising on the buggy, and we get up to the top, and there's houses up there on the left. Right. There's people up there like, "Dude," and then the caddy's jumping up and down on the green.
What a feeling.
Yeah, and it was raining, and it was like in December. It was amazing.
Did you put the ball in a little glass cube?
No, but I do have the ball. Hold on, I think I have it right here.
I love that you have an egg carton of golf balls in the background.
It's like a piece of wood that I used to chip in the yard.
Yeah.
And
it's funny.
Yeah, and I would put random golf balls there.
All right, so let's get into it.
Let's get after it. All right, so I want to talk about, first of all, I want to tell you when I... Hi, guys.
You want me to introduce
This is Jesse.
Hi, guys. I'm Jesse Lally. I'm on Bravo Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. on the Valley. We're about 10 episodes into a 12-episode season. So that's me.
And this has been a wild ride for you, man.
It's been an interesting year, to say the least. I mean, it's been some ups and downs and lefts and rights, with my personal life, with my business world, and now the show. It's been interesting. If we're going to talk strictly the show, it's like a microcosm of my life, ups, downs, lefts, and rights.
Well, I think what's interesting is that, I met you kind of when the show was just about to start filming, right? You were just about to start filming. Yeah.
So we met, Mick came over to my house, and we were talking about, I just canceled my month trip to Europe, and Mick and I were sitting in the backyard, and I was telling him the struggles I was having in my relationship and how, we'd had a real conversation about separation in 2022. And he said, "Oh my God, I didn't realize it was like that. You need to meet with my coach, Scott." And he gave me your number. I think we texted a couple times, and then word got out that we were texting, and the show came to me and said, "I hear you're doing marriage counseling. Can we film it?" And I was like, "No, well, I haven't even spoken to him." And they were like, can you speak to him at 10 a.m. tomorrow? And then we'll get him to your house at 2 p.m. And I'm like, I mean, I'm so authentic. I'm like, sure, that sounds like an amazing idea. Let's do it.
Well, we had one or two phone calls before, so at least I got a download of what I was
Right.
working with. I wasn't.
Yeah, I think we
didn't
did.
go in completely blind.
Yeah, I think we did like a 30-minute each call to sort of just an introductory call. And then
Yeah.
I think we did our first session, couples session with me and Michelle that morning. And then you came to the house.
Yeah, and I came to the house, and there was. I mean, there was a there was a clear, palpable energy that was in the room, and
Yeah.
Michelle was unhappy, and you were kind of like, I'm doing what I can do. Like it was very, and you were sort of being perceived as this villain at the time, even by you. You were like, I'm a villain. Like we were talking about it. You're like, but also you were very open and upfront with all of the things that you were going through, and they were very real for you. And you were like, you were honest about your process, and you talk about being authentic. You call yourself out more than maybe anybody I've ever met.
Yeah. The real struggle for me was like I even said on the show, divorce is not something I've been surrounded by. My parents were together, my grandparents on both sides passed away together. That idea of not being able to like fight, it's a different mentality nowadays, but like people fought back then. And, of course they didn't have social media and there was no FOMO, and you were in a small little bubble in a small little town, and you just sort of went with it. It was difficult for Michelle and I because, like I said, she wanted to leave in 2022. We had a 2-hour conversation. She said, I want you to change X, Y, and Z. I did my best to do that. And then, we got a new house together in March of 2023. And yeah, there were still struggles and there were still comments and there were still arguments. But for the most part, I mean, we went on 2 great European vacations in the summer of 2022 after that potential separation. And then, we moved into the house, and I thought everything was kind of swept under the rug. And then once you and I started working together, it was almost like all that dust that we swept under the rug, it kind of gave Michelle a platform to bring up all of this stuff that, I thought I was trying, but I was only trying 10%. And I realized what my issues were, and I realized what the issues were with Michelle. I just wasn't taking the extra 90% to be there. And to be honest with you, looking back on it and now watching the show and seeing, you can see a lot more in somebody's face when you're watching it on the screen. And I don't think Michelle and I ever had a chance. I think she was completely checked out. And the more I watch it, and the more I think about it, I think that I was, like you said, I was searching for a result that I was never going to find. And the search for the result was going to be my downfall, but the downfall had already happened.
Yeah, it was, I mean, look, a lot of times when couples come to me, they come to me to break up. They just don't know it yet. They come to me so that I can shed light on what they're refusing to see. And when you guys came to me, I talked to you, and immediately I knew you were a good guy, but you make yourself bad, which is what you do. And yeah. she was a very nice girl, and there's fear. She has fear. She has the woman's fear. She wants to provide. She wants to be sure that her life is taken care of, and she wants to she wants to work, but she wants to live a certain way. And she was very open and honest and upfront. And I think it's incredible when people come in and they're honest the way you were. That said, you were shut down, and you were drinking a lot. And you were drinking a lot in a way that was there's different kinds of drinking as far as I'm concerned. There's drinking when it's like hanging out with the boys, and I don't drink anymore. So there's drinking when it's hanging out with the boys, and then there's drinking when there's partying, and then there's drinking when there's there's a and there was a there, and it was
Yeah.
and there was a lot of, and she would go drink, and you would go drink, and she would make you wrong for drinking while she had she had a drink in her hand, and it was very confusing for you. And I want to talk about, I want you to, how did that feel for you to hear, like what was it like for you while she was doing that?
You know, it's one of the things that we discussed. I think we as a group actually talked about it, where when she wanted to leave in 2022, she one of the things was the drinking, and not so much the drinking, but sort of abandoning her at home to go out and have these like wine lunches with the guys, and being out for 6 hours and stuff like that. So she didn't want me to stop drinking, which is confusing because she's like, I don't want to be with a sober person, but she wanted me to drink less. But I said, well, what does that mean? Does that mean like, at the time I was 200 pounds and she was 130 pounds. Does that mean that if we go out and you have 2 margaritas, I can have 3 or 4 or 2, or I can only have 1 and you can have 2? And it was like, you either say, stop drinking and get a new hobby, or, and we're going to be a team about it. Or you say, it's still right now, I'm like trying to think of how to explain it. And it was just so confusing to me that I just didn't know where to go. And, I'll tell you.
My interpretation was that it was never about drinking.
Yeah. I'm telling you right now, looking back on it, the work that we've done, the work that we continue to do after the fact, she was just desperate for excuses to leave because she had already checked out. And, now ever since we've separated and she's moved out, the more and more I learn, the more and more I know why she was checked out. So, she was doing this, and she's right. She had asked me in the past to, work with somebody, and I just wasn't open to it at the time. And it was probably too little too late, but it just never felt, and like I said, watching it back now, it never felt like she wanted it to work. So it didn't matter. I could have stopped drinking, worked out 3 times a day, in the office 12 hours a day, making a ton of money. And it would have been, well, you're in the office too much. And, you come home and go to sleep because you want to be at the office at 4, it just, there was no direction for me. And one of the things that I said, on the show, and I've said it multiple times, is, we were here, we talked about this. I was here, she was here. And the idea was to meet somewhere in the middle. And it, like, every step I took to the middle, she took 2 steps away. And,
right.
One of the things we shot, and I really hope it makes it in, because it was one of the, rawest moments that we had, was you said I was terrible for 2 years. You can't treat me like this for 2 years for payback. I mean, it's just not fair to me. Like, if I'm making all these adjustments for you, you can't hold that negativity that you feel from the previous 2 years that no longer exist. You can't like put a clock on it and say, okay, 2 years, you've been amazing. Now we're going to have a great marriage moving forward. It's just not how it works.
You can't. Well, look, it's one of the things in relationships that's really important to understand, is that punishment is a problem. You don't want to punish your partner. You want to come to resolution. You don't want to carrying we call it a list, and it's like a grocery list of the bad shit that the person has, so that anytime you're carrying it around, you can just dump it on them. That's not a way to live. It's not a way to live. If there's something to be cleared, the goal is to sit down, create a container, and clear that list. And when it's cleared, have it be clear. Like, we're clear that we are no longer going to bring this up and use it as weaponry moving forward. Because if that continues to happen, it just becomes a tit for tat adversarial caveman battle. And we don't
Right.
want that.
And
That's not how relationships work.
Yeah, and to that point, that same conversation that we had where I talked about moving to the middle, you know, she admitted that like I had changed and you know, I was a more patient person and I was a better father. And I said to her in tears, "Great, you just said 2 or 3 things that you love about me. Why don't we wake up tomorrow and start fresh with those 2 or 3 things and then build from there? Like, why take into you did this the day we moved in and you did that on this day? You just said 3 things that you love. Well, that's enough seeds to, you know, grow a tree." So I asked her, could we start from there? And, you know, she said yes. And then the next day she did not. So
Right.
that's sort of the beginning of the end.
Right. And look, ultimately, when we started, I told you that my job is never going to be to keep you guys together.
Right.
If any marriage counselor or facilitator or container is telling you that they're going to keep you together, they're lying, or they're just keeping you. They're just trying to
Right.
take your money.
You said you wanted to make us the best versions of ourselves. And, you know, I've said that multiple times in press. That was the goal that I realized after we chiseled away a few layers of, you know, the top sludge that was on top of me.
Look, we went pretty hard in on you. We started unpacking a lot of you know, uncomfortable shit, and a lot of the shtick, and a lot of, you know, the Jesse show, and we and you were really brave and honest. What did you learn about yourself going through that time? What did you learn about yourself that you really felt you needed to know?
You know, it's again, it's something I said on the show talking about the journey, but as a whole, um, you know, I said I go into situations with a therapist or a coach or anybody, and I try to figure out, like, can I be smarter than them and manipulate the situation? And one of the things of the journey that I was so proud of was acceptance and being able to accept things that were happening so quickly. And I think the entire process, start to finish, kind of just it made me more open to listening than to reacting. You know, it made me more, you know, I don't know if you could call me the vessel that we discussed, but the ability to, you know, be empathetic to what somebody is saying without, you know, creating judgment. And yeah, it's a long process, but I'll tell you, I discovered things so quickly that I never thought were part of my, you know, negative aspects of my personality.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of what we were working on was for with you was uh there was a kindness, because you're very you're very direct. Like, you're just like, this is this. You're an open book, and it's weird, but there's not a there's the tone of it is like, I don't know, it can get a little hard, and
Right.
that hardness was coming out. And when we took you to your first journey ceremony, you went in and you were if I remember right, you were a little, like, you were tepid. What were you feeling that day?
You know, I said it perfectly in the circle at the beginning when we were doing introductions and you know, our goals and stuff like that. I was a 10 in my heart and a 2 in my head. You know, I don't I don't do well with things that, you know, I don't have great mind over matter. So to say I was nervous is kind of an understatement, but I was completely committed, you know, like 100% committed. And, but yeah, I didn't know what to expect. And the way my mind works is I create a lot of hypotheticals so that I can then have a script on how to deal with, like, oh, if this happens, I can do this. And if this happens, I can do that. And the hypotheticals are what causes so much anxiety. And, even walking through the front door, I was like, where should I put my stuff down? And who should I sit next to? And like, did I dress right? And, do I need to go get the, a mattress out of my car, or can I I didn't know what to expect. So it was pretty nerve wracking, to say the least. And, not only is it nerve wracking, I think, for anybody to have that first experience, we shot a scene of me packing and talking to Michelle about what to expect. Then they shot me driving away. They wanted to shoot the whole thing for the show. And it was like,
Really?
okay, so yeah, they were like, can you at least take the camera and video the inside and what, like, they originally wanted to send a crew with me. So all of that extra noise in my head was like, well, I'm, I want to do this to save my marriage, but I'm not supposed to look for a result. And what's Michelle going to think when I come home? And is she going to support me? Is she going to think it's a joke? Is she on the phone with her friend saying Jesse's like going to do this thing and it's never going to work because I had all these like things and hypotheticals going through my head, and it was just compounded anxiety. And then you sit in a room of strangers, and I was the last one to speak, and every single person ahead of me said, "This is my first time. I'm freaking out. I'm a 1 of 10 on the nervous, on the comfort scale." And then there's the guy who says, "Oh, I did it 3 weeks ago. It was the scariest experience of my life, and I learned so much, and I hate myself." And I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And then I had to listen to everybody else's experiences and their nervousness. So now I just have 8,000 things in my head. I'm like, am I dressed right? Do I smell right? Like it was That's intense.
Amazing. I think that people go into those things pretty nervous, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't, hang on a second. I don't really think that. Did anybody come in like really freaking out, like at a 1?
Yeah, there were. I think there were 2 or 3 1s and 2s,
that's amazing.
It was and I know the girl who said she was a 1. I spoke to her after the first medicine for a little bit, like right when we first started.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. Actually, in fact,
yeah,
exactly who you're talking about.
She was having a really hard time. And there was that other guy who said he did it a few weeks earlier, and what he learned he didn't like. And it was interesting because I was so hyper aware of everything throughout the 24 hours that it was interesting to see him the next morning on the couch with one of the girls. He looked the happiest he could ever look, and he came in so nervous about what else he could find out. But then the next morning he was a completely different person.
Yeah.
Well, it was.
So let's talk about intentionality, because I think this is the really what separates doing this work from just sitting around and doing drugs and community. You went in and we sat down and we did the whole we sat in a circle and we started talking, and then we got down into intentions, and you spoke
Correct.
to what you really were looking to engage with, get out of, co-create. What was that for you?
So, we had a lot of conversations about ego and, like you said, the Jesse show. And my intention, because I couldn't see it, when you're consumed by it, you can't see it. So my intention that night was to step outside of myself, to see my ego from the outside, look in, and then implement what I learned from that. That was my intention. And that definitely happened. that definitely happened. And it was actually brought up towards the end. I think it was like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was sitting with the facilitator, and I was going through it. And he sat with me. I thought it was 5 minutes. When he finally asked me what my intention was, and I told him, he was like, I think you're there, brother. And I asked how long we'd been sitting on that bench, and he told me 2 hours. And I was like, I can't believe I stayed in it that long, but I stayed in it long enough to accomplish exactly what I set out to accomplish. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was,
Go ahead.
it was the most profound experience I think I've ever had, other than, the birth of Isabella. I don't think two things had changed me as much, um, as birth and in this journey. What I learned has completely, and look, I mean, one time you can't say you learned everything, but it I was able to I was able to get back relationships with people that I had alienated based on, what I had learned. And one of the most interesting things, you know one of the most memorable things that we discussed in all the work we were doing was, you said something along the lines of, like, we have Jesse, right? But Jesse, over time, with pain and anger and success and all, you covered and covered and covered with, I think, veils or sheets or something, and we need to strip away those little pieces. And I mean, what was it? An hour into the first medicine, I sat down next to you and I was breathing and telling you what had just happened to me, and you looked at me and said, "Jesse is enough." You were like, first thing you said was, "Nice to meet you, brother." And then you said, you do know Jesse is enough. And I breathed and breathed on Jesse is enough. I still say it every morning when I wake up. And it's funny because, some of the reaction from the show when I came back was like, oh, Danny, who's also on the show, said, we go up to Big Bear and we're drinking and we're having fun. And the first time I watched it, I'm like, oh my God, I just came back from this journey and I look like I didn't learn anything. And Danny said, Jesse said he was a new Jesse. I still can't wait to meet this new Jesse, something along those lines. And I thought about that. And I said, we weren't there to create a new Jesse. We weren't there to create, change my personality like Michelle said she wanted. We were there to find Jesse and find the Jesse that was covered in those veils. And I watched back the scenes from last week's episode, and we're all like wrestling on the beach. And the one thing, first time I watched it, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It looks like I didn't do any work on myself. Then I watched it again, and I looked at my face, and the Jesse that I remember before all these years, I was like, yes, I've always been aggressive. I was a hockey player, but I used to be kind of goofy and playful. And I'm watching the show and I'm looking at me like fake fighting with everybody and fake fighting with Michelle. And I'm like, the joy on my face while I was doing it. And yeah, I had a few shots of tequila and a few beers, but the joy that I saw on my face, I was like, that's Jesse. I wasn't trying to create a new Jesse. I was just trying to find who Jesse was. Like, Jesse is enough, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
to watch it back after the fact, you won't see this catastrophic change in my personality because we're inherently who we are. And what you can do is just realize who you are and adjust things accordingly. One of the things that I've been adjusting quite a bit is listening, empathy, really paying attention to the friends that are closest to me, their support and like what that means to me and not brushing it off. I think there was a major change. And, if I went back, and it would be my second time and I'm planning on it. I mean, we've talked about it a couple of times. I'd be a 10 out of 10. This too will end. So no matter what you're going to go through, it will eventually end. And I went through, I would say, probably one of the scariest experiences, like thinking back on it. And I remember, it's crazy how deep I was, but I remember literally every single thing. I could spell it out, like from the moment I arrived to the moment I left. And I remember waking up in the morning. I was the first one up in the house, and the head facilitator was in the kitchen preparing breakfast and stuff. And I got coffee, and, I had got a cup of coffee, I'd gone out and meditated in the backyard. I came back in, he was in the kitchen, and I got another cup of coffee, and he was like, "Were you able to sleep at all?" And I said, "You know what? I flossed, brushed my teeth, washed my face, and had 6.5 hours of the best sleep." And he said, "It's impossible." I said, "Why?" He goes, "The amount that I gave you, only I could sleep on that." And I'm like, "Well, why do you give me so much?" He said, "Scott said you could handle it." So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So for those thinking about doing it, yes, it might not change your life, but if you take as much as I took, then yes, it could definitely change your life.
No, I think, look, you came in and you were available, you were open. You didn't come in with a bunch of ego. You came in and you were part of it, as we all are. And you got, you did work. Most people, when they do these ceremonies, especially their first time, it's just a total bliss out. They're experiencing love for the first time. Like we, a lot of people have experienced love, but it feels conditional and it feels like it can be taken away. But when you're in that space and it's shrouded in that, it's shrouded in what a mother's love ought to feel like, what a partner's love ought to feel like, what just love itself feels like. And so
Right.
a lot of it is creating that reference. And
Right.
we don't operate in a space that's filled with love. People that do, psychedelics in the jungle, for the most part, like, they don't do it with any kind of heart opening beforehand, and because they don't really need it as much. They live in their hearts. And we, my friend Jamie and I talk about this a lot. They live in their hearts. They operate from that space, so they don't need the extra kick to get you there. But we do.
Yeah.
We live very much in our heads. Our
Yeah.
bodies, our hearts, our spirits are neglected a lot. And you creating that space to go and reintroduce yourself to your heart, reintroduce yourself. And while people think you're on drugs, you're lucid. You're very lucid. You know where
100%.
what's happening.
Right.
You're clear. It's not like getting drunk and blacking out at all. You're very aware. And you create body memory. And you say you didn't come out a new Jesse. I'm gonna say that you did come out a new Jesse in that.
Wow.
Well, you lead with something different now. You're much easier to approach, and you create space for people in a different way than you did before. You're softer and warmer, just inherently. Something like,
Right.
it's like something chipped off of
Yeah.
you. And
Well, it's like I was saying
thing.
about the, yeah, it's like I was saying about the goofiness that I remember. There was also an amazing ability I had in my late teens, early 20s to be able to fit in any environment, in any room. And I think that's sort of the openness and the warmness that you're talking about. That, yes, I'm still aggressive and I'm still impatient and I'm 44 years old now and I'm just an old man. But, there is sort of a almost like joy that brings that warmness out, and I feel more, kind of more alive. And that's what I kept saying. We were talking, Michelle and I talking about the ego death. And I felt like when I actually felt like when I was sitting on that bench and I couldn't, all I could see was like dimensions of time. And I still remember the colors of the hillside, but I remember like trying to reach out and cross like space. It was the most interesting thing. And I remember kind of blacking out. And I said to Michelle the next day, like, I think I died. And I think it was an ego death. And it was certainly, I mean, you don't have an ego death in your first experience. It's like you said, it's work. Like what we were doing there was work, but it was like, you peel away certain pieces of armor And then as you peel those things away, the warmness and the joy and the goofiness attracts a different type of person, which continues to allow you to do the work, because now you're surrounding people with more warmth and they're more willing to be on your side or help you out because you're coming from a different place. It was I had heard the word entitlement my entire life, and I feel like I kind of lost that. Like, yes, I didn't lose my ego, but the sense of entitlement, I'm so much more aware of what other people are going through and how I can be of service to them, which was the second thing, my second mantra of the night, which I say every morning as well, which I think I've proven to be of service to people since doing that journey.
Well, that's what I mean by creating space. It's clear. It's clear what's changed. I want to talk about what hit. I want to know. Actually, I just want to know because I want to know. I don't give a shit what anybody else. I want to know what it felt like for you to be that misunderstood when this show came out, and you kind of knew this was what they were, what it was going to be. To be as misunderstood as you were, as mischaracterized as you were, what was that like for you in the beginning, and what's that like for you now as it starts to align with who you actually really are?
It actually was a perfect picture of how things actually are, because you said something earlier about me being loving at heart, and I have a lot of friends that remind people, they're like, oh, I know Jesse at the beginning, but if you get to know him, you'll see how big his heart is. And to watch it back, it's a clear example of that, where I have this tough exterior and I'm aggressive, but at the end of the day, friends and family are really the only thing that matter. And if somebody calls me and asks me to do anything at any time, I'll drop what I'm doing and go do it. And watching it back, I was stressful at the beginning when you have like all the noise coming at you and the comments and, people at Isabella's school being like, I watched the show, and, and you start to feel like you're going into a hole. But somebody said to me, well, you're extremely complex. So what you're probably going to see is they set you up here and then you see this arc of a storyline. And, I thought it was funny because I even used the line at the beginning. It was in the trailer. A good friend of mine on the golf course, when I was doing a membership round to get into the golf club. And he said to me months and months later that he's like, the first day I met you, I thought you were a douchebag.
Mm-hmm.
But once I realized you're a douchebag, it's actually very charming and heartwarming. That's sort of that's like the perfect example is like, the Jesse show and the exterior is nowhere near what the interior is, both in my head and in my heart. It's like two battles at all times. And, doing that journey, saying that Jesse is enough, it's almost like I don't need to, go into a situation in a room and be flashy and arrogant and try to be the cool guy, because it just didn't work with me. And it was a battle that I was having because I had said, as I got older and you go through bad relationships and you go through good relationships that end, and then business is great, and then business is terrible. And I got to this one point where I said I wasn't going to eat shit and say it tastes like ice cream. And the more I said it, the harder I got and the harder I got. And then it was like no shit could even come near me. And it got to the point where I was just alienating close friends because I was just, wasn't even thinking about, I had no strategy. It was just all like, how bad can I be? And let's see if I can hold the room together. And looking back on it, I'm like, what an immature way to think. It's like, people respond to, there are I have a couple friends they don't even have to say anything, but when they're in the room, people are drawn to them. And it's what you enter the room with 100%.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm entering a room with this, everyone in this room is going to be a dick, so I'm going to enter the room like I'm the toughest person here. And then when you enter the room, and it was interesting with the journey, but when you enter the room and you bring in this, I wonder what I'm gonna find out today, or who I'm gonna meet today, or what people are gonna say, or who's positive. And it's like my ego is entering the room, and it had sort of this energy around it. And now I enter the room with nothing, just open for the experience of who I'm gonna meet and who I'm gonna be able to talk to. And it's just a different mentality.
I mean, look, there's a saying, if you know you're crazy, you're not crazy. So if you know you're a douchebag, you're not a douchebag.
Right.
And there's some truth to that. I mean, some. And also, what you're saying is growth. And I talk a lot about cancel culture with my friends. We talk a lot about it, and I'm like, well, where is the grace in the room for people to grow? I don't know a single person. I don't know one person that doesn't have something in their past that would get them canceled. I just don't know. And we're in a world, and you're on a path of growth, and you're doing this show, and it's all being seen by, I mean, at this point, millions of people. First of all, what possessed you to want to do this show?
I never ever thought about it. I studied acting for years, and there was a real divide between real actors, and during the writer's strike of 2006 was really the boom of reality. And as a classically trained actor, you would never even think about doing something like this. I mean, back then, actors wouldn't even do commercials. They'd do them in Japan. And, as the waves started moving, and, my old roommate from New York, Jax, who's on our show, started on Vanderpump Rules. And, I watched his success build over the years. And then about 2.5 years ago, he came to me and he said to Michelle and I, would you be interested in doing this show? And at that time, it was a little different of an idea. But I talked to Michelle and I said, I'll tell you what, let's do it, because we can spend thousands of dollars sending mailers about real estate to neighborhoods all over the place. And most of them get thrown in the trash. So now we have a platform. So why don't we stay in this little box, and we'll be the luxury real estate agents, high-end travel, high-end wine. We'll just stay in this box, and it's a platform for us to grow our business. And we started shooting, and I took that box, and that thing just blew up. You know what I mean? I didn't stay. I didn't know that I didn't know I could say no to things oh, we want to shoot you, a marriage counseling. No, that's personal. I want to keep that on the side. I was like, sure, let's do it. What else do you want to do? So, we went in with the intention of, let's do this to grow our business, to be a recognizable face. And then we didn't know what we were doing. So we just went in and we were just ourselves. And yeah, I wanted to lay it on a little thicker with some of the one-liners and some of the quirky Jesse, things. But it started off with literally a way to, just get our name out there.
That makes sense. I get that. First of all, is there another season coming? Do you know yet?
Yes, they confirmed last week. They confirmed that season 2, and I think we start shooting in the middle of the summer again.
And so you've moved on into a new relationship, and Michelle has moved on into a new relationship. First of all, where are you and Michelle at now? Is there a relationship sans Isabella, or is it strictly Isabella? Are you still working together?
So yeah, Michelle and I, we separated in October, but we lived together until February. We were trying to keep the whole situation quiet because of the show, and quiet because I knew that our marriage sort of arc was a big part of the show. Excuse me. And we lived together, and it was very, very toxic. You know, she was going off doing her own thing, and I was in my head. And she moved out in February. We decided not to work together anymore, but we're sharing, you know, past and present clients and referrals and leads and stuff like that. So we do have aspects of work that we're still dealing with together. And then other than that, it's just about Isabella. We're still in the process, you know, we're still working out financials, and, everybody knows how it is at the beginning of a separation. And, some people have major assets to divide up, and attorneys going after each other. And Michelle and I were like, okay, you take that couch, I'll take this piece of art. And, we fought about it, because I think you and I had a conversation when I told you that we separated. And you had said to me something that I never forgot. You said, you're going to be blamed for everything, so just be open to that. And one of the things I realized in my situation was I went from married to separated, and she, as a woman herself, Michelle, was very emotional about the whole situation, where I then turned it almost like a business, and everything was very logical, which I think put more gasoline on the fire, because, the emails were like, okay, here's the corporation, this is what we need to do, here's this, here's that. But everything was a fight, and everything was my fault. And, we're getting there, but there's still a lot of animosity, especially, on her end. So, again, she's still blaming me for everything, like you said she would. So right now she lives just down the street. We do have some business stuff together. We share Isabella 2 days on, 2 days off. And we're just trying to make the best of it until it's become finalized.
Yeah, listen, I think it's natural. It is natural for the blame card to come out. Everybody's responsible when we're dealing with relationship. There's no party. It's never 100%. It's never 50%, but there's always responsibility on all parties. I love Michelle. I think she's awesome. I think she's an incredible person. And we forget that it's always possible for two great people to be together and it just not work. And that's okay. Yeah. I think she's a gem, and I think you're a gem. And I think that, the minute I talk to you, I'm like, this guy must be the most misunderstood person on the planet, because you come off as something completely different than what you are.
Yeah.
It's
funny.
It's like mixed messaging fairly constantly.
Yeah, because it's going on in my brain too.
But because your heart's so big, but there's just like so much. There's just so much.
Yeah.
I wonder what do you feel like you've learned? What's the thing you learned most about yourself being on the show and watching it back?
I think I'm very, watching myself, I'm like, God, I was so reactive in that moment. And, I like to think that I'm a logical person, but there were a lot of moments where I went back to this place of reactivity instead of, okay, let me see how we could diffuse the situation. Mm-hmm. And I kept blaming it on being from Boston. And, looking back on it, it's like, okay, well, sometimes you don't always have to win. Sometimes you can accept defeat, even if you know you're right, for the health and wellness of yourself and people around you. So it's one of the things I've been working on. Like you said, I'm seeing somebody, and she's such a grounding influence, and she's such a diffuser that I've learned, in the 4+ months that we've been together, mm-hmm. I've learned so much from her. We spent 2 hours together before I did interviews in New York, and she's like, don't say that. Don't say that. Why? Because you saying that will trigger this, this, and this. Yeah. And it's just a different mentality of thinking, and an awareness of people's mental health and mental awareness. So, it's interesting to see how a logical person would be so reactive in certain moments. You know,
Yeah.
even a situation like the last episode, I was watching it with her, and granted, we were all drinking and we were first day of vacation. It was a big party, but there was an apology scene in the car ride back to the house. And I said, I apologize if I offended you.
Mm-hmm.
And she stopped it and she goes, why didn't you just say, I'm sorry? Why did you have to say, if I offended you? Because then you put it back on him. And he actually said to me, that's not an apology. You know, it's awareness of things like that. And it's something that I think I took out of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is, like you said, it's still a work in progress. So, you know, if it was a week post journey and I did something that offended somebody, I would just say, I'm sorry. But you know, you're still working through the process and learning and stuff like that. So I think that is the one thing I learned watching it back.
Yeah. No, I feel like, I mean, I was on the show for a total of a minute and a half.
Oh, you froze
And
again.
I caught myself, and I'm not somebody who's been on television a lot. I caught myself like noticing mannerisms that I'm like, oh wow, I do that. Oh wow, I do that. Did you?
Yeah.
Did you catch yourself? Oh wow, I do that.
Yeah, and a couple things. I mean, granted, I was 30 pounds heavier, but I'm like, God, why do I always sit back like this and show all my chins? Like you see those things, but then you're like, well, if you're having a conversation with somebody, that's what they're looking at. So the camera's just looking at what we're looking at. And yeah, I don't pick myself apart like that. You know, a couple times I'm like, God, my hair looks gray. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is gray. You know,
I don't have to worry about that.
Like, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's funny to watch yourself. And I'll tell you what, I was watching it for the second time last night, and Isabella and I were doing Legos on the floor in the living room. And that girl in the first couple of episodes, and even in this last episode, that girl has some funny one-liners. And to watch her, like, we're sitting on the ground doing Legos, and she looks up and she sees herself on TV, and she like looks at me and she's like, why am I on TV? You know what I mean? It's like funny to watch. It's funny to watch her and, you know, her personality, because she's a little kid. So there's no ego, and it's just all, you know, to watch how just charming she is, like in her world as a 4-year-old. That I love. Like, I love to see. I'm like, I go through an entire episode and I'm like, damn it, Isabella got cut out of this episode. You know, it's like I want to see her every single time.
Yeah.
So
was that hard for you to decide to put her in the show?
You know, we had conversations before we started. I mean, Isabella's been modeling since she was 2 weeks old, so it's not like I was worried about her being, you know, out there to the world. My concern was what they could do with her, and that was a long negotiation for us. Like, you know, her face, her, you know, her phrases, like they can't be used on, you know, T-shirts or billboards or something. So that was my biggest concern. We were doing a show about couples and, you know, sort of adulting, right? And it's the post Hollywood world where we're all figuring out how to be friends and maintain our business and figure out relationships and figure out children. It's like, how do you have a storyline with a child without showing the child was what it kind of came down to.
Right.
As long as she was protected, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. So okay. So we're going to wrap up here shortly. What does life look like now for Jesse?
You know, I'm in a new relationship that I'm just sort of taking day by day and not putting any labels on, and enjoying sort of when I get recognized out wherever it is. The positivity is so overwhelming that it just puts me in such a good spirit, and you know, focused on business. And you know, I didn't really have much time to live the single life, nor do I really want it. But yeah, I'm just enjoying every step so far. You know, I stayed in the house, so I'm just enjoying the house and some quiet time. And actually, the thing I enjoy most and the thing I look forward to the most is I get like 2 full days of daddy daughter time. There's no like put her in the living room and do something else. It's real focused attention on Isabella, um, and it's kind of nice. It's like we have our own bonding moments.
Yeah, I love that. When I got divorced the first time, or when I got divorced the only time, I I didn't realize how much half attention I was giving to the kids because there was someone else there. But one of the gifts of that was that when I'm with them, I'm with them, and
Yeah.
and they're not bouncing off to mom, and so it really is undivided attention, and it makes them feel a specialness that you can see them light up, and it's beautiful.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it was interesting because, like you said, Isabella could be in the kitchen on her iPad and need something, and I'm in the living room working on the computer, and I could yell to Michelle in the bedroom, like, "Hey, can you check on her? I'm doing some work." If Isabella now calls me from the kitchen or comes in and says, Daddy, I want to build the Legos. I close up the computer and I'm like, I can get to it later. This is her moment now. And before it's like you said, you just pass them off back and forth, back and forth.
right.
And now it's like, and then you get to the point where like, before I didn't even notice she was on the iPad for 3 hours watching cartoons. And after like 25 minutes of her watching cartoons, I'm like, it's a little too quiet in this house. I'm like, Isabella, let's go draw. Isabella, let's go here. Let's go for a ride. And, even this morning, dropping her off at school, she's like, I want to go back to the Minions at Universal Studios. I'm like, all right, well, you have school break next week. I'll take you to Universal. Normally I'd be like, Michelle, can you please take her to Universal? I can't be in those crowds. You know what I mean? It's just too much for me. I'm like, you take her, and that was one of the problems is like during COVID, I'd be out working and I'd be, doing lunches and stuff like that. And I'd get home and she's like, well, why don't we take her to the park? And I'm like, you take her to the park. So there was a ton of that put pressure on our marriage for sure. 100%, if not the main issue. And now it's funny to see it because like I'm like, why did I miss those chances at the park? You know what I mean? When she was just starting to walk and wobbly, and
Yeah, I mean,
so now I get all those moments.
yeah, everything happens for a reason, and now you get to be more committed. You had a mirror shown on you that you weren't as committed as you thought you were, and now you are. And like I said, it is definitely a new Jesse, and I'm not just gassing you up because I like you. I'm doing it based on what I see, and if you know me, I'm a truth teller, and if I like something, I'll say it, and I really I've really seen a real change in you and a real growth in you, and I wanted to bring you on here so that people could hear the truth with no shtick. There's no set. There's no pomp and circumstance. It's just you. I think it's important because you're exposing yourself, and it's brave, maybe stupid, but it's brave nonetheless. It's funny. I've gotten like, I can't even tell you how many phone calls. You should go and coach all those couples. And I'm like,
if we do end up with a reunion,
sounds like a big job.
if we do have a reunion, we'll probably need you and security both there. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming and doing this.
I feel more grounded. I mean, physically, like I said, I've lost weight. I've been working out like crazy. I feel like more of a social drinker. Granted, I can still drink, but I feel like there's just all these small little changes. I feel like a father, but I think sort of the energy has changed for sure.
Well, alcohol is a funny medicine. Alcohol like the first two drinks of alcohol act as a heart opener. And so like when they say it's social lubricant, that's true.
Yeah.
It takes the edge off, and it makes you more open and available and warmer, and you're fun and you love and all. This is a fact. After that is when it gets tricky, is when,
Right.
shadow likes to come into the room, and spirit, they don't call them spirits for nothing. And
Right.
also when you wake up the next morning and you feel like shit and you have a hangover, and if you have a drink you're going to feel better. It's just it's a trap, and it can be a dangerous trap for some people, and it can be fine for some people.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that drink a lot, and it's okay. I know a lot of people that drink a lot and it's not okay. For me, drinking was it was okay for a while, and then it became a place to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And when anything for me becomes a place to hide, that means I'm hiding something, and I want to go in and figure out what that is, and bring it out, because whatever it is that's out is affecting my behaviors, all of my behaviors. Anything
Yeah.
that's stuck in my neurotransmitters is affecting my decision making. It's affecting, am I getting up on time? Why am I getting up on time? Am I, there's so many things that are getting affected, and I want to work towards being as clean as I can in the relationship between the big me, which is my awareness, and the ego me, which is my thoughts and emotions. And so taking that out of the equation for me personally made it easier. Uh,
Yeah.
my wife would love it if I could just have a drink, socially. So, but I don't know that that's me. I'm kind of balls
Yeah.
to the walls guy, So,
Right.
it's not for me. But you handle it. I mean, you get up and you handle it. And if you were ever in a spot that you weren't handling it, I trust that if the right person said something to you, you would do something about it.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
it's
believe you. I believe you, and I believe in you.
thank you.
All right. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Of course.
I think this is an important conversation to be had, in that we covered the journey, which is very easy for people to scoff at until they recognize and realize what it actually is, and that
Right.
it's not something to scoff at. Really, it's important
Yeah.
work that you're doing, and
It's
your life.
and it yeah, it's yeah, it's work, like you keep going back to, and it's not an opportunity to go to a house and party. It's like people were really going through it, and I remember what everybody went through, and I remember how they came out, and yeah, it was profound, is the word I say all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might go there and your medicine is that you laugh for 6 hours straight, because
Right.
you've been locked out of laughing. Like
Right.
it's work, but it's fun. There is a fun element to it. You had a bit of a rougher ride. You got to experience some crazy shit. I showed you some crazy shit. Like there's some thing going on in that space that
Yeah.
that we here don't necessarily understand.
Yeah, and every time is different, I've been told. And I remember after the second medicine going in, I call it the love room when I tell the story. And there was one of the guys in there, and he literally said he wanted female love, and all the girls, like 7, 8 girls, just were hugging this one guy, and everybody's laughing. And then all of a sudden it hit me, and I was like, wow, I am not loving, and I am not laughing right now. I am like going to sit alone outside by myself and go through it. So yeah, every time is different, and it, you go in there and get what you need to get in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I needed a baseball bat to the head, which is what I got. So, but yeah, it was
you got it. And what's interesting is you got it with love. Like you were contained, you were held. Derek sat with you for 2 hours and just worked with you, and knowing that someone's there for you is medicine itself.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was pretty wild. So I've tried to do two, and I think every time they're scheduled, I'm out of town. But yeah, I look forward to the next time for sure.